afternoon. I'm Mary Horton with this Franciscan Beat News Brief. Today, I'm joined by Professor Donald Masacchio. Mr. Masacchio is a philosophy teacher here at Franciscan University. When he's not teaching, you can find him working in the university's bookstore. Mr. Masacchio, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Shall we go ahead and dive in with the questions?
Sure.
Perfect. So can you just for people that don't know you, can you just explain how you became a teacher here at Franciscan University, a little bit about your background?
Sure. I graduated with a master's degree from Franciscan in 1999. I was seeking a PhD in Philadelphia, but it didn't work out. My middle son was sick, and we eventually moved back to town in 2013.
Okay.
And so I was teaching in various capacities at Philadelphia, either at parishes or a independent Catholic high school, or at Catholic colleges. And when we moved here, I didn't teach right away. I was just looking for jobs. But when I got a job at the university in the university bookstore, I eventually asked Dr. Gage if I could teach a couple philosophy classes, and he graciously said yes. So I'm very grateful to them for letting me do that. It's exciting.
Cool. So you started off at Franciscan and you eventually made your way back here.
Yes.
Wow,
yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So has it always been philosophy for you, or did you have other interests before that?
So I started out when I was at college for an engineering major. So I was an engineering major. Mm-hmm. And I think what makes those in common is engineering is about systems and how systems work together. And I tend to be a big ideas thinker, a systems thinker. So I like to see how things work together. And when I had a religious conversion, when I was in college, because I was kind of a cradle Catholic, and I wasn't a very active Catholic, a nominal Catholic. But when I had a conversion, I started to think about, well, what's going on in the Eucharist? What's going on at Mass when the priest consecrates the host? Because as an engineer, I thought what science tells you, which is those are molecules in that host, and they're staying the same. So you can put it under an electron microscope, and the host will remain the same throughout the consecration. Mm-hmm. But something deeper is going on, and that got me interested into the language of transubstantiation.
You wanted to dive deeper into the definition.
To get deeper into what was going on there and what was meant by the whole theology of transubstantiation. So you have to understand what Aristotle means by substance. So you have to read Aristotle, and you have to read Aquinas, and that got me going into thinking about philosophy. I probably read every Peter Kreeft book that was available in 1992, which were quite a few. He was a very prolific writer. Peter Kreeft and C.S. Lewis, and then on to sources and Plato and Aristotle and Aquinas. So I did then, when I was discerning religious vocation, we had an hour of study time, and a lot of guys read scripture and theology. I was reading philosophy. So I've always liked philosophy and really fell in love with it. And when I left religious life, I came here to get a master's degree in philosophy.
Okay, I think that's really cool how the Eucharist, which is the focal point of the church, that's what really got the ball rolling for you.
Yeah, and that's what I try to tell students is these issues really hit home in your spiritual life. So when you really think about them, philosophy and theology are really important.
Right, yeah. So can you go ahead and tell me more about working at the bookstore and how that affects your teaching classes, how many classes you're teaching, and how you balance those two jobs? I feel like that sounds like a lot.
It's a lot. Working at the bookstore is fun. It's a lot of purchasing and supply chain management. So I buy the textbooks. So I interface with faculty, which I really like. I like the books, the books end of it, because I'm a philosopher. I like to read the books. So
exactly.
I like having all these books around.
You know what's in stock for your class when you send them out.
I know what's in stock. I know what's in stock for a lot of classes. But it is hard to balance working part-time at times. But the philosophy department is very gracious and gives me teaching times that are after work hours, so I don't have to leave my desk in the daytime. And then I can just work late at night when the kids are in bed and I'm doing the reading and putting things together for class. The grading is the hardest, which is always the hardest part of teaching. Mm-hmm. So grading is the hardest.
Yes, and like you mentioned, you have a family as well. So what advice would you give to a college student who has a lot on their plate with a lot of studies? What would you give them advice to be scheduling and be less stressed?
I don't know. Don't sleep.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Saves you a lot of time.
I think you have to be disciplined and you have to move on to things. Actually, it's don't watch television and don't play games. Do what's important, pick what's important, spend time with the people who are important, and get your things done as efficiently as possible. Don't dawdle.
Procrastination.
Yeah, don't procrastinate and don't dawdle. Be proactive
Okay.
and get things done. So that's really what I would say.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to jump to something a little different here. I thought this would be a fun question for you, but like as a philosophy teacher, if you just describe in like 1 or 2 minutes really quickly your most mind-blowing philosophical concept that I can understand,
That you can
I think that'd be fun.
understand.
Just 1 or 2 minutes, really quick. Just describe it off the top of your
I think
head.
this is,
I'm sorry.
it goes from ethics into political philosophy. So I think one of the amazing things that you find is when you look at the lives of people who are able to resist centralized power and do something really unique with their lives. You find like they found what they loved and they pursued it. So I often think of John Paul II, St. John Paul II, when he was Karol Wojtyła and he was a young person, and he was resisting Nazis and resisting communists. What did he do? He joined a drama club. Why? Because he saw in that an activity that was preserving a value for culture, and that's how he wound up resisting communism. So I often say, and this is what I would call the concept of authenticity in your life. You have to find those gifts that are unique to you. You have an inner reserve, an inner capacity. There's an inner depth to us that only we know, and it's our job, and it's given to us by God. So it's our job to bring that forth into the world. And so to do that, we really need the virtues, because we need self-control and we need courage, and we need to develop those virtues and those practices. If we're, say, playing violin or we're acting, we need to develop those practices, and we need the virtues to do that as well, that are going to bring about those common goods that we share with others. So,
for like all aspects of your
when
life.
when we talk about Americans being individualistic, there's a certain narcissistic dimension to being individualistic that just says, I'm going to focus on me and whatever makes me happy. But that's not the right way to be individualistic. I think the church calls us, and what what virtue calls us and a virtuous life calls us to do, is to discern those gifts that are in us, that are given to us by God, that we find in us, and to bring them out. So our call is to find the way in which we're unique individuals, not to make ourselves happy, but to serve others, to serve the world. And when we develop virtues and bring about those gifts and goods in the world, then we're really doing what I call building, what Pope John Paul II calls building a culture of life and a civilization of love, because we are contributing our gifts. Yes, there's a political way to do that, and we want to, do pro-life things and things like that. But really, what building a civilization of love will be is finding my unique inner gift and offering that to my community.
Right.
And that's the call. And so I always tell students, however that happens in your life, whether it's playing rugby or whether it's joining a household or whether it's joining a club, being here on Franciscan Beat, doing something like that, that is so important to do when you're at college, because you're finding, you're beginning on your own, independent of your parents, to find those inner gifts that are driving you and that you want to express into the world, and doing that. So that I think is my ethics.
Okay, I liked that. I liked how you took like a philosophical concept, and it wasn't just like, for me at least, I can definitely see it more as like questioning the existence of like the universe, but you explained it in a way that it understands the person's individualism, and then using the virtues, it has them going out and serving others, which I think is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So moving on a little bit, can you go ahead and just tell me like the courses you'll be teaching in the future?
Sure. So next semester I have 2 Philosophy of the Human Person courses.
Awesome.
Which is, you'll hear a lot about that concept of authenticity that we just talked about, because that's kind of how I see the human person. And I got asked to teach an ethics course, so I'm working on an ethics course. So we're going to take a walk through how we got to this modern ethical situation where we can't seem to talk about anything. We're always yelling at each other, where left is yelling at right. And it just seems to be our discourse is a shouting match and not a rational conversation.
Yeah.
So even though it has the appearance of a rational conversation, because people will make arguments like, abortion is murder, but yet it still comes off as a shouting match sometimes. People aren't engaged in rational discourse.
Which you can't communicate with people
and
if
you
you
can't
think they're fighting.
Yeah, so how did we get there? Let's look at modern philosophy from Kant to Mill to Nietzsche to say, how did we get to this terrible place where we can't really have an ethical discourse? And then what can we do to recover that? And we'll look at Aristotle and Aquinas to find ways they can help us to maybe recover a more rational discourse and a more rational way to talk about the virtues and our ethical life. And I want to look at one practical issue. I know the course is more in theory, but we'll look at one practical issue, and I'm going to try to look at the ethics of food consumption, and food supply and farming and things like that. So
the philosophy of food.
Yes.
Very interesting for a lot of students.
Yeah, so we'll look at that. So a plug for my first ethics class next semester.
Perfect. Very exciting. Congratulations.
It's not full yet as we speak. So.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, we have a tradition here at Franciscan Beat where we have our guest, which is you, go ahead and close the show out. So I'll let you do that in just a second. But yes, this has been Mary Horton and Mr. Masacchio with your Franciscan Beat News Brief.
Stay smart, Steubenville.